Thank you all. We're going to go ahead and start. I know people are still joining, but we've got three panelists today, three wonderful panelists, all three that are huge inspirations to me and have been for a long time. I will introduce them a little bit later on. That's Rishi, Aruna, and Anita. But before we do that, we've got a quick, very quick presentation just on what we're talking about today, the engineering, the field of engineering, the careers in engineering, what that looks like. And then we've kind of compiled a couple of internship opportunities that we found that some kids have told us about. And we're going to share this online. Faria has been awesome. Faria is our president of our PTSA, and she's got them all compiled on our PTSA website. We'll share that link in the chat for anyone who hasn't seen that. All the past videos for September, October, and November, December, all of them are on there. You can go back and watch them. Let me share my screen. Okay, so just real quick, 2 minutes. Actually, they're the experts, but I'll just kind of go through, some of that stuff. I mean, engineering is it's one of the most versatile fields because with an engineering degree, you can pretty much do anything, right? I mean, anything downwards or upwards, I think that it kind of qualifies you and gives you the credibility to go into any profession. I know some of these aren't strictly engineering, but they are things you can do with an engineering degree, architecture, construction, technicians, electricians, geological engineering, in all of these things that if you have an engineering degree, and we're going to go into specifics of different types of engineering, and you guys are, the kids that are on here, you're welcome to ask any questions. You can put them in the chat or in the Q&A part, you can raise your hand and ask them. But the most popular majors are aerospace engineering, biomedical engineering has been a big thing, chemical engineering, civil, computer science, electrical, material science, mechanical engineering, and operations. And a lot of these, kind of require strong background in math and science. So many of these courses actually overlap with the math and science department. And I think these guys are kind of given their backgrounds, they can talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. And then, if you haven't already looked into this, I know there are actually in the registration thing, I think we have like 6th graders onwards, which is pretty interesting and very nice that they're thinking about this stuff. But, you have joint programs where you in 4 to 5, possibly 6 years, you can get both the bachelor's and a master's in engineering. And here's just some of them that we pulled out for you to look at. And then, of course, here's some internship stuff that we have seen. And like I said, we'll put this online so you can kind of go through this. But there's a bunch of research opportunities. A lot of the universities have summer programs that let you kind of focus on specific areas. So you can kind of go through them. And if you have questions, you can always reach out to us and we'd be glad to help you. So that's it. That's the quick presentation, very short and sweet. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to introduce our panelists. And then the format of what we're going to do is I'll let each of them kind of talk for about 5 to 7 minutes about themselves, their whole career, like from high school onwards, what they've done in their lives, the lessons they've learned, things that have gone well, things that have done, whatever they can kind of shed light on in terms of the field of engineering and their careers. And then after that, we'll open it up to Q&A. If anybody, like I said, you can put your questions in the chat, or you can. I think someone has asked for that last slide one more time, but you can put your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand. That's the preferred method. I'd really love for the kids to ask their own questions. You can raise your hand and I'll call on you. You can ask your questions. Any question, I would, as much as you can embarrass them, that would be great, but that's okay too. But so I'm gonna introduce them. So I will start with Aruna. Aruna is the co-founder of Alpha X Decision Sciences. It's a company that produces software that uses artificial intelligence to do things like predict equipment failure, corrosion, prescribe chemical solutions, and even value energy assets. Aruna helps the Texas Innovation Center, which is a UT Austin Technology Center, and helps advise companies, investing in startups. She's on the board of a NASDAQ company that is working with a cool renewables business. She's had a convoluted career path after her bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering from UT through an MBA at Rice University, which includes working for big engineering companies like AMD and Motorola, a nonprofit technology, which is a nonprofit technology incubator, some real estate, venture capital, and private equity firms. She figured out at 27 that she probably can't survive the corporate America. She has twin 15-year-olds who she says don't know, they don't think that she knows anything, which all kids think about their parents, and she lives in Houston, Texas. And what I'll do is, Aruna, you want to start, and then I'll introduce Anita and Rishi.
About the whole segue on how I got to here?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let me make sure I time myself. Okay. All right. Well, hey, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to come and listen to us talk about engineering careers. I, of course, am very biased. I think engineering is a wonderful profession. I tell anybody who asks that it's a phenomenal degree to start with if you like math and science, because you can pretty much do anything if you start out in engineering. And it's not just the engineering careers that that we talked about earlier, but a lot of people who are engineers go on to do lots of other things, including myself. So I started out getting my internship. Well, actually, in high school, I had two or three jobs. I actually had a high school job at a music store, handing out flyers in the mall, which was pretty stressful. And then I had a high school job that involved surveying people on the phone, which basically meant that people hung up on me quite a lot. Now, these things I didn't think were very useful things as far as jobs were concerned. They certainly didn't pay me enough that my parents respected me spending my time on it, but they taught me a lot about being resilient, and they taught me a lot about taking some risks. And so when we get to the end of this, I'll be giving you some advice, and some of that will be involving those concepts. So post high school, I went to UT and I did electrical engineering. I don't think that it's too surprising that I was an engineer, given that both my parents were engineers. I think a lot of people choose this profession because they see role models in it, but that shouldn't be a requirement for being an engineer. Electrical engineering was a great profession. I really loved it. I worked at Advanced Micro Devices, which was a company that makes semiconductors. And then I worked at Motorola, which is a company at the time that was making chips, what went into cell phones and pagers. That was the division I worked in. Now they have sold most of those assets, and they're a part of a couple of different other businesses, doing a couple of different other things. But around 26, 27, when I was at Motorola, I started coming into that point, which almost every engineer comes when they're working for a corporation, which is, do you want to become more technical, or do you want to go into management? And you really have to make a kind of decision there. Do you, which of these things that you want to do? And interestingly, I decided I probably didn't want to do either of those things. And so I said, I probably, while I really loved the working in the big company, you learn a lot of things there. You learn about how people communicate, you learn how to organize yourself, you learn about time management, you learn about working in teams and things like that. Great assets. But I just couldn't see myself being able to survive that. So I left and went to MBA school at Rice University, which was a small program in Houston, where you get to do something which is kind of fun, which is transform yourself from being one career to potentially a totally different career, which was in business. And coming out of there, I worked with a nonprofit technology incubator where I analyzed lots of companies that were developing all kinds of cool software technologies and other types of businesses, and helped them raise money, helped them explain what they did. And then I went from there to invest in small companies and run my own private equity venture capital fund for a while. And that was so much fun that I decided that instead of telling everybody what they should consider doing or investing in them, I should try to do this myself and see if I knew what I was talking about. And so I decided that I would finally go down the path of being an entrepreneur myself and start a business. And that is where I am today. And so there is, what this tells you maybe is that, there's no one career path in life. You're not going to be just doing the same thing forever. It's highly unlikely for most of you. I think the average person spends, only a couple of years in any given job these days. And that's only, become more and more the case that you either switch jobs or maybe even switch professions. So that's kind of where I ended up today with my career. I still actually, weirdly enough, have converted all the way back to the beginning and use a lot of my engineering, especially in math and statistics work that I learned back in school in my current job. And I've had to go back and review a lot of old physics to think about how we do work in Alpha X too. So having those analytical skills takes you through a lot of different places in life that are very helpful. Hopefully that's a good overview, and I'll pass it on.
Thank you so much, Aruna. That was great. So I'd like to introduce our second panelist, Anita. Anita was born and raised in Houston, Texas, where she graduated from high school and then studied chemical engineering at the University of Texas at Austin. She worked in the semiconductor industry for 12 years in applications and manufacturing engineering roles before completing her MBA at UT Austin and starting her management consulting career at Deloitte. Today, Anita leads Deloitte's supply chain practice, focusing on technology industry clients. As part of her role, Anita is responsible for developing new offerings, attracting talent, managing South SW Alliance partnerships, and selling and developing consulting engagements at some of the largest hyperscaler and technology infrastructure companies. She lives in Mountain View, California, with her husband and 2 children who are in elementary school. Anita.
Hello, everybody. I just wanted to thank everyone for taking time to listen to us today, and just to reiterate that it's an open environment, so please ask any question. And I saw one in the chat that I will address maybe in my dialogue as well. But I guess starting in high school, I think I was stereotypically strong in math and science. Most likely because I spent more time in that area. I took more classes, I studied more. So one of those life lessons around this is that, you will do well at things you put your mind to, right? So if you steer the car in that direction, that's where you will go, right? So be purposeful, right, about where you spend that time. I decided to major in chemical engineering because at the time, it was the highest paying undergraduate degree you could get, right? I probably didn't do the double click on that to realize that, that was going to take me to the oil and gas, industry, where I probably didn't want to work. But nonetheless, I started down that path. And I think I knew by the time I had started upper division classes, these are typically junior, senior year curriculum, that I didn't want to go on and do a master's or PhD in the field. I was very fortunate to have friends who were sort of top of the class and see firsthand what fundamental research really looked like. By the time we were graduating, they were applying for National Science Foundation fellowships and things of that nature. And I think I knew at that time that I really wanted to be closer to how was this technology being used, not necessarily on the forefront of creating it. So my first job out of school was to optimize semiconductor manufacturing processes. And we measured things in the nanometers, and we controlled variances down to the angstrom. So really precise, kind of engineering work. We really did a lot of R&D and production type of pilots to see where new processes could become scalable in production. And this first job took me to probably more than 10 states, like 3 countries in the first 5 years out of school. So I really got to go out there and see the world, be front and center in front of clients, and I enjoyed that a lot. In that time, in my time in industry, I co-authored about 7 industry papers on the use of inline spectroscopy to measure and control the photolithography manufacturing process. I got to work a lot with companies we were acquiring and people who were on the forefront of technology development. So it was exciting. And for the first time in my life, like I needed glasses because I spent so much time looking at tiny things that, my eyes were starting to get stressed. But as the market for those products didn't start to pick up, I started realizing that I was more interested in the product development and the business development aspect of this solution than the continued application development. And so that's what took me to an MBA and then eventually to a move in consulting, where I could blend problem solving, being in front of clients and driving business development in kind of a consolidated role. And similarly, I don't do engineering maybe on a day-to-day basis today, but I am in and around it all the time. My firm provides cloud engineering services. We do AI-based models to help in supply chain. We are implementing IoT and computer vision for manufacturing solutions to improve quality and yield. So the understanding that was inherent in my early days and my undergraduate degree and in work are helping me make good business decisions, right? About what is viable, what is likely, where will be the inflection point for technology as we go out and try to build this in the market. So I'll pause there and let's hear from Rishi.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anita. And then finally, our third panelist is Rishi. Rishi graduated from UT Austin with a bachelor's in electrical engineering. He also started his career in the semiconductor industry at Silicon Labs in Austin, Texas. He completed his master's in electrical engineering from Princeton University, after which he worked at Microsoft in Seattle on engineering systems of Windows. For the past decade, he has been training engineers across the country to prepare for various engineering licensure exams. Rishi?
Awesome. Thanks, Rocky. So the first thing I want to say is this is really cool. I'm pretty sure that my high school did not have anything like this. So I felt like I was definitely going in blind. It's kind of funny because in the past 20 years, I don't think anybody's asked me about my experience, but for some reason in the last year, randomly, I've had multiple people say, oh, I have a friend of a friend who's thinking of going into engineering. And I've had multiple conversations just in the past year. And what I realized a few things, but I've realized that I personally have become very opinionated about what I think a high school kid and even a young college kid should do if they're planning on going into engineering. But I also realized something else. I realized if I had a time machine and I can go back in time and I can advise my younger self and tell my younger self all the mistakes he's about to make and how to fix them, if I could tell him all of that, I could definitively tell you that my younger self would have ignored all of it and just done the exact same thing, and I would still be in this position today. I know that, right? Because I was pretty set on where I was going then, but then looking back, I see the mistakes. As you know, I give you advice. You have to decide when you're going to get a lot of advice, whether advice applies to you or not. Sometimes advice doesn't apply to you and you should ignore it, and other times it doesn't. But personally, I really love engineering. I'm going to echo a lot of what Aruna said, is that you can really springboard from engineering to many different careers. In fact, when I think back to my friends in both undergrad and grad school, outside of the ones that went off and became professors, and so outside of the ones that went to academia, the ones that went into the private sector, pretty much all of them, except for one, they all started as engineers, but they all went into other roles, whether it was marketing, some went into finance, some went to work on Wall Street, some of them became entrepreneurs. So they all went off and did different things. and I truly believe like engineering is a springboard to wherever you want to take your career. I also read an article a few days ago about how more of the top 100 companies, the CEOs, more of them have engineering degrees than MBAs. So I thought that was really interesting as well. As far as the companies that I've worked for, I can tell you that in management, especially when I worked in semiconductors, this was really true. In management, they would ask technical questions to even the marketing people and the people that are coming in to lead the teams. They wanted to make sure that they would understand the underlying technologies. And we're living in a world that's becoming more and more technical. So you're definitely seeing that. So I think it's a great year, great career choice from that standpoint for sure. There's also a few other things that I realized talking with kids. Often the reason why somebody young wants to go into engineering is because something they are experiencing, right? Like, you know, if you like to program a computer, maybe you want to do computer engineering. Maybe you like cars, you want to do mechanical engineering, or maybe you're excited about like all these new space companies. So you want to do aerospace engineering. I've been hearing that more and more. But what I can tell you is this, your interest will change. As you go through engineering, you're going to learn about all these other areas of engineering that aren't as widely advertised. And you're going to start to see other cool areas that you're not even thinking about today. And then as you get out in the professional field as well, some of the areas that are very popular today, you know, things like AI, they weren't as popular when I was in school, right? So the career path changes, your interest will change, and so when you're going and you're choosing a discipline and you're choosing a concentration, I think it's important to keep as open of a mind as possible, even if you think you have your mind set up. Now, as far as I'm concerned, so I started my career in semiconductors. I did what's called applications, where I helped other companies design in or semiconductors, and also work with the design team a little bit to look at it. Then I did my master's. Then I worked at Microsoft, and that was a very interesting role because I had I worked as what's called a program manager, where you work on the engineering team, but you also design. You also do what's called a functional design, where you design high level what the engineering product will look like and how it will interact with other engineering products that are being produced by the company. But yeah, I think it's a great career, and I told you, I think I've become very opinionated on what I think people should do, and I'll probably share some of that advice with you, and I hope it's helpful.
Very quick question here. What about gaming? What kind of engineering is that?
Sorry, I missed that. Gaming?
Gaming.
Yeah, game design or game development. What kind of engineering is this?
So obviously software engineers, a lot of software engineers going to gaming. That would probably be the biggest role. Graphic designers, which not really an engineering field, they tend to go into gaming as well. Those are the two fields I know that go into gaming.
Computer science.
Yeah.
Yeah, the computer science, and but there's a lot of hardware related issues involved with coding software that runs on these types of platforms. So the software engineering part, yeah, comes into play.
Awesome. Thank you, Linda, for the question. Thank you, Renan Rishi. So like I said, any questions? I've got a couple of questions that have been sent to me. I know Ruby, you had a question. Anita and Aruna have put answers. Anita, did you want to elaborate on that at all, or
Well, I did want to just share that when because I did chemical engineering, there were probably at least 20% or 30% of my class, this is some time ago, who wanted to go pre-med, right? And so the only kind of maybe caution I would have around it is that folks who really know that they want to go to medical school, you know, it's a long journey, right? Because of, you know, you need to do medical school, you're going to do residency. And so taking an engineering undergrad may not be the fastest path, right? Because there's a lot of math curriculum, labs, you know, other applied science curriculum that you will not have in just a core, you know, undergrad taking you into medical school. So as long as you recognize that, you know, along with the incremental kind of benefits and skills that you'll have with the engineering degree, there may likely have some extra time that comes along with it, and obviously like a very competitive environment from a from a grades perspective.
Okay. And I think so there's a couple of questions I think in the chat. There's a talk about AP courses. I think Naresh has asked a question about which courses and APs you want to take to get into engineering easily. I'll just before we get to that question, I want to ask you guys about high school. I know that high school's been a while, but I don't know if you guys remember in high school where you're like stressing about every class you take, and how you might have done on a particular test and how that's going to affect your future. If you could go back to high school and redo it, what would you do differently? And that's a question for all three. Yeah, that's a question for all three. Whoever wants to start.
So it's hard to, with the knowledge you have now, to say what you would have done differently, because I feel like you made the decisions based off of the information at the time. But the one thing that I've learned later in life that I wish I took more advantage of when I was younger, both in high school and in college, is that you can create your own opportunities, right? You can reach out to people. I got a piece of advice once from, I don't know if you guys know who Tim Ferriss is. He's the guy who wrote 4 Hour Work Week. And he came and spoke when I was in grad school. And he gave a piece of advice that at the time I blew off, but later on has turned out to be really true, is that when you're in school, people don't view you as any kind of threat. You're seen as a kid who's trying to make their way in the world. Versus when you're an adult and you're out in the professional world, everything is viewed transactionally. It is. You go out and you try to email out for an opportunity. It's like, do I want to spend time on this person? What do they want to return? Will I have to give up? It's a lot different. So when you're young, you can reach out to people. You can ask for opportunities. You can do it when you're older too. Don't get me wrong. It's just you're viewed differently. And so when you're young and in school, I would have taken a lot more advantage of that.
I have a thought about something I would do differently. I don't think I realized till later in life that there's different kinds of math. There's math, which takes you into accounting. There's math, which is calculus, and there's math, which is statistics. And, my high school, I don't even remember if they had a statistics class, but increasingly, I'm seeing that a lot of high schools have statistics classes. And just because you may not be good at pre-calculus or calculus, or may not like it as much, you may be good at statistics. So that's a different area of math, quite frankly, your brain may tune to, just like some people are good at algebra, are better at algebra than geometry. Some people are better at the mechanical engineering, like forces, and others are better at the physics. And both of those are considered physics, but one is electricity and magnetism, which takes you to electrical engineering. The other one is mechanical, which takes you to building, or civil, which takes you to building and construction. So there are, even within certain concepts, divisions of those concepts. I, for one, knew that within physics that I did not like any of the vector force mechanics physics. I couldn't do any of that. So that pretty much eliminated all the mechanical, civil type engineering. And I could never memorize any of the chemistry stuff. And so you give me a compound, I would forget it instantly. So like that pretty much eliminated that. I knew I wanted to do something in science and technology. So I ended up where I did, kind of based on that. So I don't know if that helps, but just to not think of things as just one or the other, like just there's different kinds of math, there's different kinds of physics. And so give it more of a nuanced view.
Yep. I'll just add to that. I think even in the chemistry and biology realm, right? There are aspects of chemistry that are very like organic, like memorize how these compounds, come together. And then there's an entire field in chemistry that is basically physics. It is the physics of how, right, atoms and molecules behave together. And so depending on, which way you're more prone towards, like, you will have, choices, right? And where you specialize and what you want to do.
But, let me, and I actually I appreciate all you guys have said, and I think that the main message I just got is that there's not one thing that can negate your ability to go into engineering. I mean, if you really enjoy it, there's not one bad grade that's going to stop you from pursuing that career, or one, a class maybe that doesn't go well that's not going to allow you to kind of go down that path. Is there, I mean, would you say that in high school, like, or let me ask you this way, is there one thing in high school that maybe kind of solidified your path, or something that you experienced that made a big difference in ultimately what you, or in college actually for that matter, that kind of said, this is to kind of change the trajectory or solidified the path that you were on? I don't know if that question makes sense, but
I'll just say for me, I don't think so, right? Like, I don't think there was a big moment. I mean, of course, there were reasons I, picked decisions and went in those directions, but I'd actually take the opposite view and say that, like, look internally, decide what you like, what you don't like, right? Give yourself some options out there, and then just take steps forward, right? And like, no decision you make is going to be, career ending or, something of that nature. And people these days don't work for, their entire careers in one job, right? And the field that I'm in, kind of the average lifetime of most employees is definitely less than 5 years. So maybe in that 3 to 4 year range. And people will come in, they will have done, industry related analyst roles, they can move on to consulting, they will go to startups. And so you just have to, continue. I would say actually my bigger maybe message around this is, no matter what path you take, you have to continuously develop yourself, right? And continuously develop your skills, because if nothing else, like the kind of the place we're in now, where technology is advancing so quickly, if you think only school is kind of where you end with that, and then you go off and work, like, you will be obsolete very quickly, right? So I would say that more so than being worried about what that next first step is, have that kind of like continuous learning mindset, because no matter what path you take, you're going to have to continue to develop and grow.
I have a thought on this. So I started out in college, and the first year or so was pretty rough. And I wasn't sure whether I would stay with the major. But then I got an internship. And going into the internship and having a chance to actually see what it's like to work in one of these companies and be a part of it and demonstrate the use. So everything I'd ever done, for example, in school with coding, seemed very esoteric and strange to me. It was like a very fake sort of thing. Give you an exercise, you code it, okay, great. But when I had to go to work and was given those exercises to do, all of a sudden, it all kind of clicked for me. Like, all of a sudden it was like, oh, that's why it's important. That's why it's useful. And so to me, it actually solidified my choice as a major. I went back and it did so much better for the next few years in college, because I actually knew why I had picked it and why it was important, and that I could be successful in it. And these days, I'm seeing that almost everybody after their first, or definitely their second year of college, is getting internships. Even if it's just for the 3 months of the summer. Getting internships after the first year can be difficult, but if you guys take Rishi's advice and ask, your friends and family, find people who are willing to give you internships, and don't worry about getting paid, because that's not important. Getting paid to learn, when mainly after your first year, you're basically saying somebody trained me to do something where I can be partially useful, but just the experience of it will help you decide whether you enjoy it.
Rishi, did you want to add to that, or do you
Um,
want
there wasn't any big one like Anita said. I think I mean, in general, I mean, the resources today are much different, right, than the resources back then. And now you can find the places where you can go and create experience for yourself even at a younger age. And so you can actually experience some of these things early on. You can I know a couple of the bigger companies, I don't know if they still have it, but it's like for example, in software, I know that Microsoft at one point had a high school internship program. I think they might have, during the 2008 recession, they might have ended that, but I think Dell had one too, actually. Now that so these opportunities do exist, and it allows you to experience some of the stuff beforehand, which can give you a good idea of what you're going to be getting into.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions in the chat. I'll just kind of go through them before I come back to the other ones I have. This one, I think that Gates and y'all's perspective of this industry, right, and given kind of where you're working, so I think Devishis has asked this question, that I have a perception that there's not enough opportunity to work as a true engineer. As you can see, most of the people move to a different career. That AI dominated world, do you think that the need of true engineers would even be less than what we have today? What do you think? Yeah.
So I don't know if I would agree with that sentiment. The reason why people move to different careers is not because there's not enough roles in engineering. It's because, after 10 or 15 years, they might want something different, or they want to move into management. Aruna kind of alluded to this earlier. In engineering, you have to decide how your career path is going to go. Are you going to climb the technical ladder, which a lot of people do? They climb the technical ladder. What that means is they stay in doing engineering work, but their career path is just, they take on more and more responsibility, and they get more and more recognition for being a technical leader at their company. Or you can go up the management ladder, which a lot of engineers want to do that, but others don't, because they don't want to manage people. Right? Some want to go off and become entrepreneurs, right? The opportunities exist. Now, as far as how AI will change all of that, I don't want to try to predict the future, but my own personal view is that AI will be a tool that that engineers will use to make them insanely more productive. Until the machines take over, then that's a different story. But until the machines take over, I see it as a tool. And actually, Peter Thiel, who I'm sure you guys know, wrote the book 0 to 1, right? And in that book, he talks about this, and he talks about how AI will basically massively increase productivity, but it's going to require human input in a lot of cases. So every technology that's come out, pretty much every single one, there was always a fear that it was going to replace jobs, and pretty much every technology has ended up expanding engineering field, not contracting it. So that's my view.
I can only see my part of the world on this one, but over here, we deal with a lot of different types of engineers, and we are an AI company, and we definitely see it as a productivity tool that helps enhance engineers to focus on more difficult things as opposed to doing rote things. And so I don't see a shortage of engineers. Absolutely not. I think that the world needs more engineers. Engineers are creators and so problem solvers. And we're seeing more and more crossover of fields now, which has been going on for some time. And so, you know, just like we see biomedical engineering, you see a lot of software now in buildings and in cars and all kinds of things. So there's a lot of crossover work. There's a lot of things happening. So, you know, back when we were in school, biomedical and environmental engineering were not even there really as professions. So there's all kinds of things that are happening with even with new materials. So I don't see this as being a concern.
Okay. Anita, did you want to, or we'll go to the next question?
I put a bunch of stuff in the chat, and so just echoing that, I think, yeah, definitely there is a tremendous demand for engineering in this country, and I think it is vitally important that we sort of keep that capability and that skill set. And you are starting to see public policy moving in the direction of keeping some of these roles, you know, specifically in the United States, and it will be the foundation, right, of a lot of what we do moving forward in terms of our infrastructure, as well as like the way we live moving forward. So.
Awesome. Okay. And there's been a couple of questions about AP classes and honors. I know that, you know, if you guys think back to high school, and we kind of talked about this a little while ago, but I'll just ask it more specifically, but that, you know, how important are AP classes? How important is it to take like AP Bio or AP Chemistry or AP Physics, you know, for an engineering degree? Like how important was any one class when you got into engineering, into the engineering at you know, UT or wherever?
I don't think any one class makes a difference, right? No one class will make or break you. Obviously, every engineer is going to have multiple math classes, multiple physics classes. So if you want to know which APs you should take, those are probably there. But if you don't, when I think back to my friends in high school, not high school, college, when I think back to my friends in college, we're coming from different high schools. Some of them had not taken any APs. They were fine. And some took a bunch and they were fine too. Right. I mean, of course you get some college credits. So the ones that took some, you know, they moved forward, and the ones that didn't, no big deal. They took the college class there. I don't think there's any, there's definitely no make or break. There's decisions in terms of APs for sure, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think you should think about APs as like an accelerator to, you know, to maybe finishing some classes in college, but I don't think it is a like an entry requirement by any means, right? And I would say more commonly now, right? We've been out of school a few years, but more commonly now, I do a lot of recruiting for the firm that I work with. So we often see as schools have become so much more competitive these days, as well as the cost of school being, you know, I would say in some ways almost exponentially higher, you know, than it was maybe 20 years ago, that there are a lot of kids making some really smart choices about where they want to spend their time and their money. And that might mean that they go to, you know, a local school, right, for the first 2 years. And if they didn't take 30 hours of AP classes, you know, coming out of high school, they can get through their core discipline and math, science, you know, English, and the other prerequisites before going on to upper division classes in a reasonably good school that is affordable, you know, and they become older, they become more mature, and then they make decisions about, now is this the right time I want to transfer to a Berkeley or to a UCLA or to a, you know, to a Stanford or something of that nature. And those folks go on to do just as well, you know, maybe better because, you know, they've got 2 years of loans versus 4 to pay off. But I mean, they come into, you know, their upper division classes much more mature, much more aware of what it is that they want to do and purposeful about their time. So I would balance that, right? It's great if you can take all those AP classes and place out of a bunch of hours, you'll start college, near upper division level courses. But also recognize that that means you need to continue to be at that pace, right? And now you're going to come in with kids from every high school everywhere, also competing at that level. You have to decide if you're ready for that, or no one's disappearing next year, right? Might I want to take some time to explore what else is out there, kind of hone my own soft skills, right? I think increasingly today, just being superb in one vector of anything, math, science, etc., is not going to make for a long-term career success. And so if you have the time and the opportunity to do some of the things that Irina said earlier, to put yourself out there, to maybe, take some risk, right? Develop other types of skill sets. Actually, that will help you as well in the long term. So don't feel like you're kind of trading off or missing out on things, because all of it is accretive to your long term.
Oh, so I was thinking about high school, and one of the things is that, at least in my kids' high school, there's a lot of clubs, and I always tell them go do the clubs. Even if you don't end up staying in the club, just check it out. Just try it out and go over and see what they're doing. So for example, if you thought that you're interested in robotics, or for example, or computer science, there's probably clubs, right? So I would just join them and check them out. Maybe you go to a couple of meetings and you think, okay, this is probably not something I'm interested in, but maybe it is. The other thing I'd say is, if you're in a club, take a position. You don't have to run the club. Maybe you're treasurer, maybe you do something else. Just volunteer, put yourself out there to do something, so that you learn, so that you can kind of get more engaged with it. Because only by doing things do you learn about yourself and what you like. If you don't do anything, you don't learn anything. So you have to do something in order to learn about yourself. And when you learn about yourself, then you can make these decisions faster that Anita and Rishi are talking about. What do I like? What do I not like? Which class do I want to take? Which class do I not want to take? So if you're not sure, you can always, that you're, for example, interested in statistics or chemistry, and you might have to decide for next year, well, if there's a club or people in the school that have taken it, go talk to them and find out.
Awesome. So I think that was all wonderful advice. And I'll just, if it's okay, I'm going to summarize what you guys said, that, I think high school and college is a time of exploration and in experiencing. I mean, you guys, not one class, not one activity, not one exam is going to make or break your future. It's all a matter of exploring and experiencing as much as possible, because you don't know what one thing or a series of things is going to change the trajectory of your life, right? And so you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what path, basically. So I think that's all wonderful advice. And I hope that, especially as a lot of kids here, especially in California, I think it's very different than in maybe Texas, that Texas, I thought maybe, or in our generation, it was probably a lot less intense. Here, there's this goal of taking 10, 15, 20 APs or whatever it is. But your goal is to experience as much and explore as much. And when you lock yourself down on one path, it prevents your ability to be able to do that. So there's a question in the chat. How does a degree from a well-reputed engineering school, and then actually after this, I want to ask you guys a couple of other questions about interviewing and your experience with kids as you meet them. But the question is, how does a degree from well-reputed engineering school compare to one from a second-tier school in terms of job prospects and subject matter learned?
I don't know that I have the experience to answer this question, but I will tell you something that most people may not be thinking about. And that is that a lot of people are now going to universities and then transferring to other schools. So even if you get into one place, don't think that that's sort of the end all of it. You need to, if you get in somewhere, put your best efforts to doing well and then affect a transfer. Anita, you kind of referred to some of that with people with the associate, maybe going to other schools and switching, but this switching around is happening. So, and it's happening all the time. So I'm not sure that I can answer this question, but I can say that if you feel like you are in a situation where you think you need to be at a different school, you're not limited just because you started somewhere from moving.
Yeah, I'll give the perspective from like more from, historical. So like 12 years ago, I think most management consulting firms that were strategy oriented always wanted to recruit from top tier schools, right? So, they focused their recruiting in those schools, and they would go primarily, get slots for students and things of that nature. But I will tell you that a lot of corporate America has opened their eyes to the fact that this behavior and the behaviors you guys likely see in schools and even in universities is entirely contrary to societal goals around diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Because who are in these schools, right? They are likely kids who've had parents who've had privilege, who have been able to go to, extracurricular clubs and unpaid internships and et cetera, et cetera. So we are increasingly changing our recruiting profile to not just look at top tier schools for a slim set of people who are basically exactly like us, right? But to start to look at places that produce operational excellence. So like Arizona State University, like Penn State University, high degrees of operational engineering programs, we start going there. We are also heavily looking at historically Black colleges, right? Because that is a great place to get top Black talent, out there. And then I would say last is there are a number of people who went to what might be considered second tier schools, but then they went on and they did great operational roles at fantastic companies like Procter and Gamble, or, flagship names of different corporate entities, that then we love to have those people because their industry experience is tremendously more valuable on top of whatever college education they have. So just speaking from kind of my vantage point of where did I end up, and now what do I see in the recruiting pipeline, it has changed tremendously in terms of where we were maybe 10 or 15 years ago. So if I were, I think maybe to come back, like if I were now, of course, everybody wants to apply and get into the best school that they can, but just realize that, you'll do what you do and the outcomes in some cases are not in your hands, right? But in the end of the day, like making the best of what you have, right? And continuing to like sharpen your skills and be market relevant is in the end of the day what will make you successful.
That's awesome. Rishi, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I've met some really brilliant engineers that came from small regional schools. And I've met some really brilliant engineers that came from big national schools as well. But I guess it's a small part of you as a total package. And after about 10 years out of school, the effect probably wears down completely. When I think about the bigger company I work for, like they had engineers all over the place, small regional schools, big schools. And I think after a while, like that doesn't affect like their engineering ability at all. You kind of gain the experience over all. Most of what you learn in engineering is probably out in the workforce, not in school. In school, you learn the science and learn a lot of the basics. So from that standpoint, when you get out in the professional world, you obviously have some things in your belt from whatever school you came from, but everybody's kind of starting on a somewhat of a level playing field because everybody has to learn in the workforce about whatever industry they're in. And from that standpoint, where you came from school, the effect is much smaller, if any.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So I've gotten a couple of other questions, but I have two last questions because I know we're just approaching an hour. The last two questions, I know all three of you guys have been involved in recruiting and involved in interviewing, dealing with high school students, whether it's for college admissions or for internships or for other stuff. Can you tell me, what is the one piece of what is the one big mistake that you see kids make when they are talking to someone or interviewing for a position? Yeah.
So I have definitely, so when we interview younger candidates at the companies I work for, and also I have interviewed for undergraduate admissions as well, there are some consistent mistakes I see among younger people. And there's a few that jump out immediately. Number one is, and I wouldn't think this would be an issue, but it is younger people, sorry, I don't want to group it like that, but there's a different approach to email. I guess people that have been out of the professional field for a while, they respond pretty quick, but I've noticed that younger people might take 2-3 days to respond. And for any interview, it's not a good idea. I want to respond probably within 24 hours. And I've seen high school kids that I've interviewed take 4 or 5 days to respond. That's not a good idea. Number two is you have to remember that interviews are human connection. You want to form that human connection, right? So in other words, I see younger people try to blurt out as fast as they can everything they have done. And like I'm coming at this and I can barely keep up with them. I basically have a bulleted list, which I already have. I have their resume, right? Instead, form that story. Pick like 2 or 3 things. 3 things max, right? It may be one academic, one non-academic, and give them the whole story. What got you interested in it? What kept you going in it? How'd you grow in it? How'd you become better? What challenges did you face? Give them that whole story so they can see who you are as a person and see you grow, rather than trying to blurt out everything you've ever done, because they won't keep up with that. It's so hard, especially in a conversation, to keep up with somebody that's trying to give you everything. Oftentimes when people interview, they have to write a report on you afterwards, right? And what you can do is you can write that report for them with your conversation, right? Like think about if you're directing a movie, you wouldn't give them the end of the movie at the beginning, right? So let's say like you're in a leadership role of an organization. That should be the last part. Show them how you started in that and how that led to you being a leader of that organization, rather than just say, I'm a leader in this organization now, right? And then the final thing I'm going to say that I've noticed consistently with the younger generation when they're interviewing is they speak way too fast, right? And I think it's part of being nervous, maybe, right? A lot of them is their first, maybe second or third interview max. So, so just remember conversational tone, human connection. Those are what's important in the interview. The more academic stuff, the bulleted list of what you're going to do, that's on your resume or whatever, right? Focus on maintaining. Actually, this goes, let me make one more point, if it's okay. This goes back to the question about regional school versus elite school. I remember a buddy of mine, he went to the University of Arizona, and there was a job that he was applying for. He was so excited about, really, really, really excited about. And he went into that interview, and afterwards I asked him how it went. And he says it started off as a very highly technical interview, right? They were having him do circuits on the board and everything. But halfway through the interview, he found out that his interviewer also went to the University of Arizona. And he goes, from that point on, that's all they talked about, right? That's all they talked about. And he got the job, right? He was so excited, right? So he formed that human connection. That's a much bigger deal than try to say everything you've done, in my opinion.
Aruna, anything, do you guys want to add to that, or I can go to the final question?
I just put some stuff in the chat.
Awesome. Okay, sounds great.
I would just say that one thing that you can do, which people don't often do, is ask the interviewer also questions. Like, you can also ask the interviewer to describe more or talk about their experience and things like that, or their guidance or advice. Those are just things that most young people wouldn't think to do with another person that they're being interviewed by, but it does help you figure out how to make the human connection that Rishi talked about, which is really important.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I have one final question. And the interviewing question is mainly because, like, I think a lot of I know a lot of kids in the when they registered for these series, there were a lot of questions about college admissions and interviewing and jobs and internships, and keeping these points in mind would be super helpful as you're talking to people, especially in the research and engineering side. But the final question I have for all of you is, most of the kids in here from 6th, 7th, 8th grade up, sorry, my light keeps turning off, 6th, 7th, 8th grade through high school. What is your one piece of advice for each of them as they go through high school into college?
I'll reiterate what I just said before, that when you're in school, I mentioned what the advice I got from where people view you differently when you're in school than when you're out. And in high school and in college, and it's not just professional opportunities. We've been focusing a lot on professional opportunities. It's personal stuff too, like friends. Your network of friends a lot of them are going to go off and be successful, and they're some of your biggest assets. You can get jobs through them, and they can get jobs through you, right? That's what friends are, right? Also, speaking of college, though, one of the things that I realized was a big asset that people don't view as an asset is your professors. People had more an adversary view of professor, that they have a hard class and I'm trying to get the A, and it's like this battle, right? But professors are human, and I didn't view them as human when I was in college. They are human, and they often have a lot of connections, and they often have, they often know a lot about the industry. It's very hard to have a relationship, to get to know your professor. But I know a few people that have done that. They have got to know professors and kept relationships up with them. And for the people that I know that have done that, there's something that turned out to really help them later on in life. They were able to call on that person later. Sure.
Awesome. Aruna, Anita?
I'm going to go back to, okay, so when you hit your teenage years, you start developing these executive function skills. So you start to learn about you have to learn yourself, right? You start learning yourself, learning what you like. You start thinking more deeply about these things. And it's a lifelong process to keep learning about yourself. Nobody, I think, ever masters it completely. But you can't learn about yourself if you don't go out there and do something. Because every time you do something, you learn more about yourself. So my advice is go do something. So take a risk, get a job, get an internship, volunteer for a club, go lead a project, take a small role in a theater performance. Someone needs help, go volunteer to help them, just so you kind of see what they do. It's not going to hurt you to spend a few hours helping somebody who could learn something, and you never know what you might learn from that process. But all of these little things, these little exposures that you get, they build a framework for you to decide about things that you like, you don't like, and why you like them, why you don't like them. And all of those things help you figure out more. And so don't be afraid to take those risks, because they will help you go down that path.
Anita?
Yeah, I like both of those. I think probably the only thing I would add is that today, like, I think young people can do a lot more, right? You don't need to wait until you're done with a master's degree to start your career. And so, don't be afraid, right? To put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to do things that may be slightly contrary to conventional norms, right? And just, trust in yourself, right? That you have the capabilities, you have the abilities to do what you're passionate about doing.
It's awesome. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate all three of you being on here. I'm going to just summarize a couple of key points that you guys mentioned through this. One is in the beginning, you guys talked about how engineering is probably one of the most versatile career options, right? With an engineering degree, you can pretty much do anything, whether it's go on to graduate school, medical school, or whatever, or any other profession. Second thing, we talked about just, the idea that nothing in high school or nothing in college is going to make or break or negate your ability to go down this engineering path. Or stop you from pursuing a career in engineering. We talked about exploring and experiencing as much as possible in high school and college. Reaching out to people, offering to volunteer, offering to just talk to them or whatever it is, and then I guess I'll end on something that Rishi told me earlier. That he had that lecture he had talked about Tim Ferriss, right? Tim Ferriss had given some advice to his class, which was, pick someone that inspires you, right? Rishi, do you want to tell that story?
Yeah. So along the same line where he was giving that that advice that I mentioned earlier, he said, yeah. So he said, when you're young, when you're in school, nobody views you as a threat. You can get away. You can get more out of people. Now, some people will blow you off. That's going to happen, but they're not going to view you as a person that's trying to get something out of it. They're going to view you as a person that's trying to make their way in the world. So he gave a challenge to this particular class I was in. Now the class had about 60 people in it.
And actually, Rishi, I'll just interrupt you, that I think this challenge is something that we should put out to everyone here, that they should do the same thing and they can forward it to us. But go ahead, Rishi.
So he put out a challenge, and the challenge was just email somebody that you really admire, right? Like me, anybody. Just email somebody that you admire, and forward him the email, and he's going to pick 2 winners. And one winner will receive a free ticket anywhere in the world. Second winner will receive a free ticket anywhere in the US. So I was thinking about it that night. I was like, maybe I should do it. And I was like, whatever. And I got busy and I kind of forgot about it. Several weeks later, I met somebody who was in that class that I didn't really know before, who had actually won the top prize, right? He had emailed somebody that he admired and forwarded it to Tim Ferriss, and he won that trip anywhere in the world. And I was talking with him about it, and we were talking about it, and he actually got to talk to Tim for a little while. And it turned out that out of 60 people in the class, only 2 people took up the challenge. Right. It's a lot easier to blow off opportunities than to say yes. I blew off so many opportunities that I now look back and I'm just like, wow, why did I do that? That would have really helped me. I did what I thought was best at the time. I let the chips fall where they may, which I think is overall good advice. Make the best decision you can and let the chips fall where they may. But when opportunities do come your way, when somebody does present something for you, think twice before you blow it off, right? Think maybe this is something that I should just follow up on, right? And nothing may come of it. That happens a lot too, right? You follow up on something and nothing comes of it, but often every now and then one of those opportunities will turn into something.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys, very much, Anita, Aruna, Rishi, for being on here and sharing all this advice. I hope this was inspiring to all the kids on here to kind of follow what your passion is, follow what you enjoy. And like I said, the challenge, it would be great for each of you to pick one person that inspires you, send them an email, and forward it to us at the PTSA. We'd love to see it. So, all right, thank you very much. Our next session is going to be in a couple of weeks. We actually been talking to a couple of the college admissions officers to come on and kind of give us an idea as to what they look for in college admissions. And so, you know, if you're on that mailing list, you'll get an email with those details. So thank you all. Thank you, Rishi, Aruna, Anita, so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Good luck, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.